Okay, so as an adjuster, I would say one of the biggest pains of the job is getting a supplement and also just simply not knowing how to handle a supplement.
You in the past, I'm in the future. You mad that they don't salute you. I need a
Thank you guys so much for clicking on this video. If you're new here, my name is Keely Trishan and I make videos on lifestyle, insurance, and mental health. I also do vlogs, day in the life in the insurance industry, day in the life with a toddler, all the things. So if that's something that interests you, go on ahead and click that subscribe button below. Turn on your notifications so you don't miss anything from me. And if you're returning, thank you so much for coming back and thank you for your support. Okay, so supplements. What are supplements? Typically, it's going to be like a counter estimate that you're going to get from your customer once you've already paid them their initial estimate. A lot of times we call it an undisputed estimate, and that's just like a term to say this is what we know is owed. And I feel like, at least in my experience and a lot of my coworkers, we didn't get much training on supplements. I had to learn the hard way and I had to go through the trenches to know how to even handle supplements so they don't intimidate me anymore. But I know that that's not the same for a lot of adjusters. We are taught to write essentially a bare bones estimate in the very beginning. We write what we know is owed based on the inspection and just kind of what we hear from vendors, what they recommend being done. So we write an estimate based on that, which also gives the illusion that we are only trying to pay like the bare minimum. The thing is, we're trying to pay what we know is owed. But what do you do when you get that supplement? How do you even begin to review it? How do you know what's owed? How do you know what is fluff? That is what I want to talk to you guys about today. I want to give you guys a little crash course in how to handle supplements and hopefully give you some confidence when you're dealing with this. So if this is something that you feel would be useful to you, definitely go on ahead and stay tuned. Okay, so my first tip in reviewing supplements is do not let the dollar amount scare you. I know that's easier said than done, especially if you wrote a $10,000 estimate and now you got a counter estimate for $70,000. You like, how am I supposed to resolve this additional $60,000? Okay, and I get it. I completely get it. We are in a tough spot as adjusters because not only do we have to adhere to the policy, we have to do that while still maintaining customer service and making sure that the customer gets put back together. So there's a lot of things that you're looking at. You're looking at, what type of materials they're using, what are they asking to replace, what are they asking to reset. It's so many different things that go into it that dollar amount, you can't even really worry about the dollar amount until you look at other things, which I'll get into in a second. So don't let the initial dollar amount scare you, especially if that's the first thing you do. Even to this day, that's the first thing I do. I do go to the end of the estimate to see, okay, what is the damage? What am I trying to resolve? I do that just so I can have an idea in mind of what I'm looking at. But there are so many different elements of an estimate. So the dollar amount really is the least of your worries. So if you just got your estimate, don't worry about the dollar amount. Do the other steps I'm gonna tell you before you worry about the dollar amount. I got you. This brings me to my next tip. You need to look at the scope of work that the contractor is asking for. There is no way that you're ever going to agree on a dollar amount or get to some type of common ground if the scope is different. So a lot of the things that I'll see is maybe you have to detach and reset something. So something common that we would detach and reset would be like a toilet. If you have to address drywall behind it or if you have to address flooring, a lot of times you're going to have to detach and reset that toilet in order to do a proper job. Now, some contractors will put to replace the toilet, and then you have to ask yourself, why are we replacing the toilet? If the toilet is not damaged, we wouldn't owe to replace it. We would only owe to detach and reset it. You have some situations where it's not always the customer, but sometimes a contractor, he's trying to charge more to essentially just, get more money, right? So they'll start adding in things that don't necessarily make sense for the claim. Or you might have a situation where the customer's like, oh, well, this is the perfect opportunity. I want to change this toilet anyway. Let me go on ahead and change it now. And they can do that, but it doesn't mean that the insurance company owes them to replace this toilet if there was nothing damaged during the loss. So that's what you're going to want to do. Look at the items that they are requesting. And if they haven't listed out what they're trying to do, ask that contractor to break down what they're asking to do. There have been situations where I've gotten an estimate and it just says, 40,000 for this, and this. I need to know what you're charging for each item so I can see if it makes sense. Typically, we're using a program in insurance, Not even typically. We're always using a program in insurance where we're typing in the square footage of something, the linear footage of something, like everything is based on measurements and floor plan. So you want to know exactly what they're charging for. What is their cost for material? What is their cost for labor? You need to know all of that so you can even begin to compare your estimate to the contractors. So second tip is going to be to make sure that you are looking at the scope. If there are any scope differences, then you want to resolve that before you even start working on the dollar amount. Okay, so I kind of touched on this in tip number 2, but my third tip is going to be to ask the contractor to break down what they are asking for, what they're charging for, what does their estimate consist of. So typically this is going to be materials versus labor. A lot of times you'll see on estimates, especially if they're not using like an industry standard program like Xactimate or even Symbility, if they're giving you just like a handwritten or like, typed on their letterhead type of estimate, then you might see drywall, $3,000, or paint, $7,000. You want to know, okay, so out of the $7,000, how much of this is the material cost? How much of this is the labor cost? Because that way you can figure that out in your program. And you can put that, what I typically do is once I find out what the contractor is charging for, I'll enter in those numbers into my program to see if we're in line. In some cases, they're completely in line with the program. But then in some cases, you'll see that they are charging an astronomical amount for materials or an astronomical amount for labor. Those are also things that the insurance company doesn't necessarily owe for. Like, yes, you do want to get to a point where you don't have your customer paying out of pocket like a crazy amount. So, you can definitely talk to the contractor and see if you can reach some kind of common ground. But these are kind of ways that you can resolve those differences. The programs that we use are typically going to offer enough money for what it would be average to get the work done in the customer's market area. Now, it is an estimate. So sometimes there's going to be a contractor that's charging more than us. Sometimes there'll be a contractor that's charging less than what we're offering. But if they're charging more, as an adjuster, you need to figure out why they're charging more and if it's reasonable enough to get that work done. So ask for a breakdown if you don't already have it so you can see where your differences are and if there are any price concerns that you need to have a discussion with the contractor about. To kind of piggyback off of that one, asking about the breakdown of materials and labor, you also want to make sure that the items that they're going back to replace with are like, kind, and quality. That's another thing that will sometimes trip up adjusters because you're trying to compare something and it's like maybe this person only had average grade tile, but they're trying to go back with like a higher grade tile or a nicer tile or even a different type of flooring altogether. The insurance company does not offer that, okay? Now, the way I usually have this conversation with the customer is we owe you for what you had. So if you had Berber carpet and it was 10 years old, we owe you for like, kind, and quality Berber carpet. We don't owe, if you want to go back with tile, you can absolutely do that. But if that tile is going to be more expensive than the carpet, you can use the money that we're paying you for the carpet towards the price of the tile and you can pay that difference, but we don't owe you to put that back. So that's a conversation that you want to have and make sure that when you're looking at the supplement, you're looking at like what they actually have. Now, this is where Google, YouTube, all that stuff is going to be your best friend. There are still times where I'm reading an estimate and I don't quite know what they're going back with. Like it might have the name of the material or something, but I'm not quite sure what that is. I am not above pulling up a quick Google photo, looking at specs and all that, and then comparing it with what my customer had. And a lot of times you can kind of tell right off the bat that, they going back with something that is more expensive or like better quality. And that's something that you don't owe for. So right there, just with those tips, you're starting to eliminate and break down some of these additional costs. There are times though where it is the same like, kind, and quality, but maybe the labor is astronomical. So that's why you want to make sure that you're comparing apples to apples, because you're never going to get to common ground if you're comparing apples to oranges. Okay, so my fourth tip, after you have done all the other work, you've agreed on scope for the most part, you update your estimate with the items that you know are owed, I would suggest preparing for negotiations. And so this is another thing that can be tough for new adjusters because you just don't know enough to be able to negotiate. But you also want to kind of get with your managers and get with your training team to know kind of like what we can let slide and what we can't. So I'll give a quick example. When you have like a public adjuster or attorney on a claim, a lot of times this is where you're gonna have to negotiate, okay? So one thing that I'll usually be like, I'll kind of have in my back pocket, painting the ceiling. So most times, like if you have damage to your walls and the floor, the insurance company would pay to paint the walls, and, replace the flooring if it needs to be replaced. But we wouldn't touch the ceiling because the ceiling was not damaged. A lot of times when you get a counter estimate from a public adjuster or attorney, it's going to have the ceilings involved. Like they're going to want to paint the whole room. So I will kind of put that in my back pocket as like a negotiating thing, because it's usually not that big of a deal. You do have to be able to explain it, and it has to make sense, because you don't want to give away the house, because that could get you in trouble. But that's something where, depending on like the type of paint inside the room, depending on the type of damage, especially if there's a situation where it's going to look crazy different or whatever, then you might be able to kind of swing that. So that's something that usually insurance companies might, kind of like, okay, you can have that. Now, when it comes to replacing something that doesn't need to be replaced, like I've had situations where, we just simply need to like unplug the appliances and move them out of the room. But maybe the counter estimate has to replace the appliances. The appliances were not damaged. We're not going to replace the appliances. So that's something that you'll have to stand firm on. When it's something that's like super crazy like that, or something that we just really don't owe and cannot justify, you're going to have to stand firm on that. So you do want to get comfortable with being direct with contractors, public adjusters, and attorneys. But at the same time, you want to be fair, and you want to also be willing to negotiate. Like you don't want to be that adjuster that's like, no, 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 because word travels fast and the industry is kind of small. So eventually everybody starts to know who's who, and you don't want to be that adjuster that is not reasonable, because then you get that reputation where they're like, oh yeah, such and such this, and so people don't want to help you, or people will try to come for you even harder because they don't like you. So I try to be fair as I possibly can. I'm not going to put my job on the line for you, but I also understand that there might be like additional labor that goes into something, or maybe our program just like in previous experience, it doesn't give enough money for a certain, trade. And so I'll try to help you out in the best way I can, but it has to be within reason. It has to be something I can justify. So have these conversations and be frank with your contractors and stuff if you're still off on the dollar amount, because at the end of the day, your job is to resolve the claim, and you want to try to lessen the amount of money that the insured is going to be paying out of pocket if you can. So have these conversations, and a lot of times they are willing to work with you because they want to get paid. So just be flexible, but be prepared to negotiate. Okay, so my last tip is to get a general contractor out there if you're in a situation where you can't come to an agreement with the contractor. Now, you can do this in the very beginning. I do that a lot because I have like more complex claims that just have like a bunch of moving pieces, a lot of different rooms are affected and all that. So sometimes I just bring the general contractor with me to the inspection and have a consultant estimate prepared, or at least have them there with me so they can let me know what I need to include in my estimate to ensure that the work is done properly. So depending on how big the loss is, you might just want to engage a general contractor from the very beginning. But in situations where you were planning to handle it yourself and now you have a contractor that came in to the picture and you just cannot get to like some type of common ground, go ahead and send a general contractor on behalf of the insurance company. This helps because the general contractor is able to speak the same language as the contractor. So they can go out there, they have the expertise, and then they can also school you as the adjuster on what is warranted and what's not. I have a claim right now where the whole house was pretty much gutted because of a water claim. And a lot of the materials are like super custom. Some of the things are old. Some of the things have like super labor intensive like repair processes and stuff. So the contractor that I sent out had a conversation with me like, look, I know normally you guys wouldn't, pay for this, but in this situation, it's going to be warranted in order to bring this person back to pre-loss condition. So with that, from that contractor, I can put that in my notes and say, hey, I spoke to such and such from blah, blah, blah company. They said that it makes sense to do A, B, and C, so I'm recommending that we do A, B, and C. So when I send it to get approved, I don't have any issues because it's not just me saying it. It's not just me taking the contractor's word for it. It's me having one of our experts go out and provide this information so we have a leg to stand on if it ever gets audited. So that's something that, again, depending on what your expertise is and depending on what type of claim you are dealing with, that might be like a really good option for you. Get somebody out there that's on your side, that has your best interest, but then also knows how the game works, in the construction world, and can give you some real life information for what is actually owed versus what the contractor may be trying to pad on the estimate. All right, you guys, so that is all I have for you today. I know this was like kind of like a crash course in reviewing supplements, but I really hope that this information helped. I will say that when I first got into claims, like this was not something that we went over. And from what I'm hearing from new adjusters, it's still not something that is gone over. A lot of times, like you're taught just to go out there, get that initial estimate out, but eventually you're gonna start getting supplements, and sometimes they come in at the same time, okay? So it can be very frustrating as a new adjuster, or even sometimes a seasoned adjuster, to get a supplement and you don't even know where to start. So these tips are just kind of where you can start, just like something to give you like a map on how to even look at these things. Now, every company handles supplements differently, so do whatever makes sense for your company. But these are some things, especially if you're on your own and your company has thrown you to the wolves, you can use these tips to help you get started and to start resolving these claims and get them off your desk and essentially out of your life, so you can, lessen the anxiety, okay? Anywho, if you enjoyed this video and if it helped you, if you learned something, definitely go on ahead and click that like button. It really helps with the YouTube algorithm. If you have not already subscribed and you made it this far, please go on ahead and click that subscribe button below. Turn on your notifications so you don't miss anything from me. And with that being said, you guys have an amazing day, and I'll see you next time.
You mad, they don't salute you. I need a bag, size is super. They turned your bag, it's like I never knew you. Leader.